Thank you for joining us for our May 10th Management Committee meeting. I will call the meeting to order. We've got everybody here. I think Counsel member Lee will not be making it today, so we'll move on. With that, we've got the agenda before us. Everybody's had a chance to take a look at that in advance. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, then without objection, the agenda is approved. We also have before us our April 12th draft Management Committee minutes, and those were given us in advance as well. Are there any changes to the minutes? Any questions? Seeing none, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the draft minutes of April 12th. Someone moved by Barber. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Lilligren. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed no. And that passes unanimously. Now we will turn it over to Bill Walljasper, our new Deputy Regional Administrator. So first of all, congratulations, Bill. We are very fortunate to, of course, continue to have your service, but again in this role, because you've been there before, but now we're never letting you. It's a real deal. So I'm thrilled for you, and we're very lucky to have you with us on management full time with this committee. And I'm going to turn it over to you because this next item is yours.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. I realize this is really testing the eyesight on the monitors. This was just posted online, so if you click on the presentation on your iPad, it'll be a little bit easier to see. So my apologies for that. But this first business item is seeking council authorization to renew its railroad liability insurance effective June 1st of this year to June 1st of next year in an amount not to exceed $2,500,000. Now this insurance provides coverage for liabilities that arise out of NorthStar commuter rail operations. It's something that's a contractual requirement with our agreements with Burlington Northern. And the limit of insurance that we need is $323 million, which is, again, pursuant to the contract, but that's also tied to the federal cap on passenger rail. Now that's a lot of money, $323 million, that's a lot of insurance, and when you need that much of insurance, you need to utilize several different insurance companies, which the graphic is meant to depict how we get to that point where we get $323 million. So what we do is we present our program, we meet with the underwriters every year, talk about our operations, make sure they understand what we do, what our safety culture is, our loss history, just so that they're comfortable with the type of operation that we run. We then determine who wants to be a part of the program. Once we have that determined, we focus on that very first layer, the lead layer of insurance, because each one of these companies will provide different amounts of insurance. They're kind of stacked upon one another to come up with a full $323 million. So the lead layer we negotiated with AXA XL. They have been our partner for several years. They're a great company. They understand our operations. They've been out here several times. They give us a very competitive quote. And the reason that lead layer is so important is because that quote sets the stage for the pricing and the coverage throughout the rest of the tower. So this is oftentimes referred to as a tower of insurance, an insurance tower. But there are a lot, and there are a lot because it's a tough market, and a lot of the companies have dialed back on what they're willing to put up in terms of limits. They won't put up the amount of limits they used to do back before the market started to crash about 5 years ago. What's also been a challenge is because, as I think everyone has probably seen in the papers, there have been a lot of derailments around the country. Those derailments are paid for by the very same carriers, and they have exposures that we see in our program. It's a very limited number of carriers that offer this type of insurance, so it's important to get out there and establish that partnership, make sure they're comfortable with what the risk is. We had a very favorable quote. I will tell you that it came in roughly flat, which is remarkable compared to what others are seeing in the industry. And it's a good story to tell. It's a very safe operation. Tony Hebert, our director of commuter rail operation, joins me. He talks about the culture, he talks about the partnership at the end, and that results in a very favorable quote. So with that, Madam Chair and committee members, again, the business item is seeking authorization to renew its railroad liability insurance in an amount not to exceed $2,500,000. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any questions? I would just have one. So what is causing us to have essentially a flat quote? Is it something we're doing, or is it just the nature of NorthStar how safe it is and because there's history with it, or what is, I mean, we're lucky, or we're not lucky, we're just good, I guess, I'm not sure.
Well, Madam Chair, I would say you just don't fall into luck. I think it's years of showing what we do with our operations. I guess there might be a little bit of luck, but I think we have a very safe culture. We have a very intentional focus on safety, not only with NorthStar, but with the rest of our operations. And we bring that out in the presentations. We talk to them about our light rail side. We talk to them about our bus side. We talk about our safety department. We talk about how we partner with the first responders and our different committees that we have for safety. And we've had a very favorable loss history. We just have not, we've had losses, but the way the statutes are in Minnesota, we just haven't gotten to the point where we are more liable than the other party, and we pay very little on this.
Great. Anything else? All right, then I would go to the committee for a motion that the Met Council authorize the renewal of its railroad liability insurance effective June 1st, 23 to June 1st, 24 for the NorthStar commuter rail operations in an amount not to exceed $2.5 million. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Pacheco, is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Cedarburg. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That passes unanimously, so thanks, Phil. We appreciate that. We'll now move on to information. We are going to receive our 2022 fourth quarter and 2023 first quarter procurement summary and MCUB goals. And we've got Director of Procurement Jody Jacoby with us and Ashanti Payne from the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity as the Assistant Director. So welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here. And yeah, it'll be great to get the update on 2 quarters worth of hopefully good progress. So thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Jody Jacoby, the Director of Procurement Department, and Ashanti Payne is with me, my partner, the Assistant Director in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. And as the Chair mentioned, we're here today to present an information item on the procurement summary and the Metropolitan Council's underutilized business, otherwise known as MCUB, report for the fourth quarter 2022 and the first quarter of 2023. And for new council members, it's not typical that we're presenting 2 quarters at once. However, when the report was ready earlier in the year, we had a series of unusual weather and meeting cancellations, and thankfully the sun is shining and hopefully we're in the next season. And so that's why today we have 2 quarters that we're presenting to you as an information item. And also with new council members being onboarded, it just made sense to hold this information until this time. The council's expenditure policy 14-2 for the procurement of goods and services authorized the regional administrator to approve awards not exceeding $500,000 for goods and services and construction not exceeding $10 million when they are within the approved capital budget, the cost is within 10% of the engineer's estimate, and of course when we have the funds to complete the project. And you've seen through your committees individual business items for each specific contract. So if it's a goods and services, there's an individual business item when the value is $500,000 or more, or if it's a construction project and the value is $10 million or more. And just as a point of clarification, I noticed today there was an error in the background section as the cover report. The delegation for signature authority increased in 2012 for goods and services. It was $250,000 and it increased to $500,000. And construction was $1 million at that time and increased to $2.5 million. And as a result of the increase, the council asked for this informational item and report. Last fall in 2022, the signature authority for construction contracts were again increased from $2.5 to $10 million, but it was not increased for goods and services. And so the informational item that you have before you for each quarter is grouped by procurement value and also procurement type. And it contains a comprehensive list of all contracts greater than $175,000. And that value is significant because by state statute, we need to formally advertise opportunities publicly, and we do so at the council on the Doing Business with the Council page. And in the last few years, we've been really proactive with some specific trade publications and also professional association to broaden our reach to other industries to ensure that our suppliers are seeing our advertisement. And one example is advertising a construction opportunity to the Association of Women Contractors and also the Association of General Contractors, not just relying on the Doing Business page. This report has evolved over the last few years. As you are aware, the council is committed to equity and equitable contracting outcomes. So as a result, it has been updated to include a column that looks at a DBE, which is the diversified business opportunity or diversified business enterprise, or the MCUB goal and the final commitment. And I'll start the last quarter of 2022 reviewing the summary, and then I'll transition to Ashanti to take a deeper dive into the goals and the details for that quarter. So we'll start first with fourth quarter 2022, where we had individually 9,736 procurement events. And in fourth quarter, that totaled 157,330,342. And that's pretty typical. Those individual events either could have been a purchasing card, a purchase order, a request for quote, or a construction bid. Fourth quarter typically is very robust for the council, where we're closing out projects and we're working aggressively to spend those budgets that we've allocated for the year. And compared to 2021, fourth quarter had 1,800 more individual procurement events. However, we spent $227 million less. So you can see it really depends on the work that the council is doing. At the bottom half of the second page has the pie charts, and on the left side, 95% of the procurements by the transactional value were less than $10,000. And what that means is it's a micro purchase, and where you only have to get one quote, and you can go directly to award working with the vendor. And again, that's an area where we have a lot of opportunity to utilize new vendors. We have a lot of opportunities to work with our targeted vendors as well. And on the right side, the graph illustrates 82% of the procurements by value had a value of $175,000 or more. You'll notice that in future reports, those percentages are pretty consistent. But some notable items that we're so proud of reporting on the success as we closed out 2022 is our MCUB micro purchase amount increased in 2019. And if you're using local funds, you can have a purchase order with an MCUB by only getting one quote up to $25,000. If you're using federal funds or some other special dollars, that micro purchase level is capped at $10,000. So you can see there's an opportunity for efficiency, there's an opportunity to try new vendors, and really a great opportunity for MCUBs as well. And in 2019, the overall average was 3.5%. Again, that was the first year we increased it. And in 2020, it increased to 3.75. In 2021, the average was 13.75. And then rounding out 2022, the average increased to 16.25%.
Jody, just real quick, are these numbers, I'm just trying to track on the grids and things, so where are we at on the comparison year over year? Or is that just a narrative?
It's just a narrative.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, it's super interesting information because that year over year is, you know, very telling. And I would just say, I want to interrupt, you know, but I'll come back to it because this is such good information. So just keep going, and then at the end we'll do questions and comments.
Yeah, it really shows some intentional behavior changes and a really great teaming and collaboration with our partners in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity to source those vendors. Our partners in the business units who are changing behavior and seeing a lot of success. And that came with that increase in 2019 with increasing the MCUB micro purchase level, because it was much more administratively efficient as well. And then more good news, closing out fourth quarter, we saw that all goals on projects, and you'll see the individual projects with the goal listed, every one of those had a higher commitment than what the goal was set at. And in fact, in fourth quarter alone, there was $3,075,000 more committed than what the goal was set at. And combining that information with quarter three, that tracked at $7.6 million.
And Jody, again, this is narrative, it's not in
Yes.
here. Okay, because I'm gonna ask you to put that in graph form for us at some point, and you know, just so that some of that stuff is just so good for the year over year, right? And I'm a visual learner, so that would be great. But this is great news, so keep going. That's great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is really good news, and it really shows the consistent and proactive work and the teamwork and the trust in the process, and then measuring the results and then sharing back, because it's a shared victory for our agency, but also for those MCUB vendors and also for the region as a whole. So those are some of the procurement highlights from fourth quarter, but I'll transition it to Ashanti to talk more about fourth quarter.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members, and committee members. Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director with the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. I'm going to focus in on some of the key data points with the Q4 and spend most of the conversation talking about the changes and improvements to our reporting process that you'll see for 2023 moving forward, starting with Q1. So Q4, in terms of payments, total payments to MCUBs, we were at 6% of our 14% goal. And in terms of goods and services, 8.7% towards our 10% goal. And I will note that 8.7 in terms of the payments is the highest we've seen. We've usually been around, it's steadily been increasing, but it capped off at around 4.5% in Q4, went up to 8.7%. Also, in terms of the division.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Starting on page 12.
Thank you. I was just went
Sorry,
through
sorry,
here. Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, we're with you now.
All right.
Thank you.
And then as well, if we look to page 14, where we have the division breakdown in terms of goods and services. Regional administration always does really well, and they're up over 30%, 36% in payments. However, regional administration does not do as much purchasing as our two larger divisions, Metro Transit and Environmental Services. We continue to see more of a distribution. When we first started doing this, we had a glaring gap in terms of participation from vendors owned by women that are Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and Asian. And over previous years, we had 0 in some of those categories, and we continue to see participation from those groups, largely due to direct efforts, targeted outreach and engagement with those individuals, and trying to connect them with business units within the council. And a couple of success stories for Q4, and this is on page 17. We've had some successful state contracts, and we continue to see that. Why that is important is because historically that was viewed, when we've used the state contract as opposed to a competitive process, it is kind of seen as, oh, well, small businesses are going to lose out. And we found just through research, identifying that, yes, there are MCUBs on the state contract, and in educating our business units and staff that there's opportunity and we need to utilize on that opportunity when it presents itself. Same can be said for emergency declaration contracts, again, when they're not competitive, but we're still able to get participation from MCUB businesses. The other thing I want to point out in Q4, and we will continue to track this, this was a 2-year effort in partnership with Procurement and OEO to develop a supplier diversity program with some of the commonly purchased bus equipment that we get historically through New Flyer. And we worked with New Flyer to set up a supplier diversity program. And this is an area where we got 0 participation historically. And we have set up that, and we will continue to track and report on that, and as we find ways to expand that program moving forward. We also had held and partnered with our other partner agencies within the region, that being MnDOT, City of Minneapolis, Metropolitan Airports Commission, to do a new disadvantaged business enterprise orientation. And all Minnesota-based DBEs, so they were all MCUBs, 30 unique firms attended, and we partnered with our fellow agencies. I will turn it back over to Jody to cover the Q1, and then I'll talk about those improvements that we've made that you'll see for 2023.
Great.
All right. Now jumping into the current year, first quarter 2023, and you'll note this is page 18. You'll notice right away the number of procurement events. Again, those could be a P-card transaction, a purchase order, or any of the contracts that you see on this report is significantly lower. We had 7,801 events. Still a lot, but a lot lower than we ended in fourth quarter. And then on the converse, on the right side of the page, 64,442,173 was the spend. So every quarter is a little bit different. And what we've recognized is first quarter typically is slower with rolling over some of the holidays. The construction, a lot of the work is very seasonal. And a lot of the procurements are more about just kind of keeping the lights on and setting up the business units with their strategy and their contracts, which you'll see on second quarter report. But similar on the bottom of the page, the pie charts, where 96% of the transactions were less than $10,000. Again, that's a micro purchase where only one quote is required from the project manager to execute a purchase order. And then on the right side, 75% of the procurements by the contract value is greater than $175,000. That's pretty consistent regardless of the number of transactions and the dollar value. One thing not on the report again that we implemented in first quarter, we being my staff, who some of them are here, is we implemented trainings, 4 different trainings council-wide on construction contracts, sole sources, which Councilmember Pacheco attended some of those, Procurement 101, conflict of interest training. And we had over 358 council staff attend those trainings. And we see that as really a positive opportunity to have those exchanges, really share information, have some teamwork, and demystify a little bit of what the procurement process is. How long does it take to have those really efficient and effective outcomes? So we're very proud of that. Something that you won't see on this slide is we had a really heavy quarter. We had 49 amendments that we worked on, and that's about double other quarters. And that could be because of the pricing being advantageous in former contracts. It could be the work just took longer because of the supply chain issues or some of the staff shortages, or a bit more complicated. And as Ashanti mentioned in his presentation with fourth quarter, again, we had some really successful state contracts being utilized with firms who are registered as an MCUB. And then what we're seeing as a positive trend as well is when there is an emergency declaration, that's definitely not something that's positive, but the business units are being much more proactive with looking at our MCUB vendors. And in fact, IS issued contracts with 3 different MCUB firms for an emergency to help with some of their as-needed services. And those contracts totaled up to $6 million. And that's a significant behavior change, different thought patterns, and looking at really what type of vendor and the qualifications are still very important, but looking outside of what is a typical vendor that they've always used. As Ashanti mentioned as well, the partnership with New Flyer, which is located in St. Cloud, they supply a lot of the parts for our buses, and in the last quarter alone, we had about $300,000 committed through New Flyer to work with MCUB vendors. And I'll transition to Ashanti.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, we made some changes and improvements to our reporting process for 2023. You may, or some council members may recall that in our previous, even Q4, we are only reporting on commitments. But now we will be reporting, we only reported on payments. We now will be reporting on commitments and payments. And I just want to say that all of these changes that we made are part of the ongoing efforts between OEEO and procurement to improve our small business reporting. And why that is significant is commitments are really a barometer of the health of your program right now. And then it's also be able to tell if the initiatives and strategies that you're initiating are actually having an impact, or you need to pivot or try something different. So this is definitely a positive addition. And as you see for Q1, and Jody mentioned this, and we do have a bar chart to demonstrate this, that out of the total contract dollars for construction and contracted services, and I'll explain that a little bit in just a moment, we had 17 million, a little over 17 million. In order to meet the goals that were established by the small business contracting goals established by the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity, we would need to commit 1.8 million. However, the commitments were actually above that at 2.35 million and resulted in total commitments of 13.7%. And this is
Thanks.
Councilmember Lilligren would like to.
Ashanti, you're on page 28, right, of the report.
correct.
I have a question about, I feel like I'm missing a piece of the puzzle here, and it's a vocabulary question. And so can you please define the difference for me between goals and commitments, and I get the spent part, money has gone out the door and we can measure that, so if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's good.
Thanks.
Yes, so when a procurement is being initiated by the council, it goes through a process with procurement, it comes to the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity, and we evaluate that opportunity for subcontracting opportunity and establish, and we may establish a numerical subcontracting goal for MCUB firms, or if it's federally funded, for DBE firms. And that goal gets advertised with the project. Bidders know that they have to, at minimal, achieve that participation or demonstrate good faith efforts. So when those bids come in, the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity evaluates to make sure that they've either sufficiently met or exceeded that participation goal or demonstrated good faith efforts. So what we are seeing, the trend that we are seeing is that what those bidders are committing to MCUB businesses are exceeding the goal that we said, that we established at the beginning of the project. So the commitment is what they've committed to, what we've documented, what we've evaluated, and then we also, of course, monitor the project through payments to ensure that what they committed to at the beginning of the project is what actually happened at the end of the project.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, good clarification.
Yeah.
And Ashanti, you know, it's never, projects aren't done until they're done. So just even along the way, it'd be nice to see how much commitments versus, you know, at the end of the project, there's shifts. I mean, maybe we tap them to do more or some, you know, I don't know. But I love how, you know, we're tracking this year and that's factoring into, so we see it, I think, sooner. So that's great.
Yes, and I would just add that another reason why that's important is payments are really that compliance mechanism as opposed to trying to, because a specific project that gets bid and advertised, you know, when we're reporting on payments, we could be talking about payments for a project that was from 5 years ago and including a payment that was just executed 2 months ago. So it's important to look at them project specific, but also just to see and measure payments overall, just to kind of track what we're doing and what's going out the door.
Totally, thank you.
And then also I want to point out in error 2 on page 29, in the breakout of divisions, there was a project that was 100% MCUB that did get added to page 1 that did not get added to the breakout. It would fall under Metro Transit. It was a 200,000 plus contract. So the correct amount is 2.3 million and 13.7% commitment achievement. And in terms of numbers of businesses in the MCUB directory, it is around 2,000 businesses in the MCUB directory compared to about 850 in our DB directory. And there are some reasons around that, but there are more businesses represented. One, the eligibility criteria to be a DBE is stricter. So I guess you could say more exclusive. So that's kind of why that number is lower.
And Ashanti, over the past year or 2 or 5, how's, you know, I'm assuming it's increasing every year, but how's that increase? Has it been minimal, or are we seeing jumps, or how are we doing on you know, extending and getting that out into the marketplace so people can get into that pipeline?
Yes, so in Q1 alone, there were 82 new MCUB firms added to the directory. And then I actually even have some certification success stories that I'm gonna get to too at the end that I'll share. Because it is an area of the work that kind of gets overlooked a lot, but it's important. It's important to the overall process. And then in terms of DBE, which any Minnesota-based DBE goes into our MCUB directory, yearly we get Just in terms of what the council does, in terms of is around 50 to 60 new DBEs get added per year on average.
And Ashanti, what's the attrition? Businesses, I should say, leaving the list for I'm sure a variety of reasons.
Yes, Madam Chair, council members. Yeah, the attrition, I don't know that I have any exact figures for you today, and I can get those. But I would say I would guess about 30 to 40 businesses we lose per year. I know this better for the DB directory side than I do MCUB. Only because our MCUB directory includes certified businesses, which is controlled by the city of St. Paul. So we're reliant on a lot of their information in terms of attrition.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting because everybody knows that a number without history or reference or other points to see what the trends are is a number. So is 82 good? Sounds good. I don't know how many businesses are out there that are eligible, but I think you're doing great work for sure. But that's just kind of interesting to see what are the trends. And I don't know if we do any kind of a question or can do some even just spot checking when people businesses are no longer able to be on the list, just to find out what are the reasons for that. And not to load you up, but just so we know, because a lot of what we're trying to do and we've been doing, at least for the past 4 years is just that pipeline, right? We've been talking a lot about the pipeline, so I can see it's happening, and you just want to know, the churn or the turn, what might that be? Again, it could be a lot of things, right? But just if you have points of information for future, that'd be great too.
Madam Chair, council, committee members, yes, we will. I think we are on the schedule at some point to do our MCUB program analysis where we present that data, who's in the directory, disaggregated. So we will certainly come back and provide any of those points that are not included that you mentioned and make sure we cover those as well.
That's great, thank you.
I'll just say as well, Madam Chair and council members, one of the areas the purchasing team, who typically works on the smaller dollar transactions, the manager is looking at all the detail, the data by purchasing agent. So there's the different commodities that they're assigned and business units. And then another factor is timeliness, but also MCUB utilization. And so if their utilization isn't at a measure that is consistent with other purchasing agents, we're digging deeper to ask why. So maybe we can do an outreach to some of those vendors who we think may certify, or also connect them with the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. But really, again, looking at that data and having that shared responsibility so we get to that outcome that we really want and need, and seeing some really great success stories. And really, it's coming from a lot of our staff who are actually doing the work.
Also on page 29, I want to point out, this is another change is too, we're still reporting on payments, but in previous reporting cycles, we were reporting in terms of goods and services and construction, and we've changed that to construction and contracted services and PCAR. This is important because in previous reporting cycles, if we had a design and engineering project for Blue Line, or we were purchasing pylons for Gold Line, that got included in the same bucket as if we purchased pencils. Even though it's advertised, bid, and contracted in the same way as a construction project and it supports construction, it just makes sense for it to be counted with the construction and towards our 14% goal. So that is a change so that you will see moving forward that we feel is an improvement. And then just in comparison for Q1 2023 versus Q1 2022, in terms of payments, we had a 64% increase in terms of payments to MCUBs. And then page 30 is the PCAR breakdown. Now, we feel P-card is a good barometer for the agency because one, this is the closest that we have to real-time purchasing that we have. And then also, there's a lot of room to be intentional in how we spend and conduct our spend with P-cards. In terms of who did the best by percentage, transportation services had 9.3%, followed by Metro Transit at 6.9%, and Metropolitan Council Environmental Services at 4.2%, Community Development at 1.5%, and then Regional Administration 1.4%, and a total 5.4% towards our 10% goal. And then in terms of demographics and utilization, again, one of the things that we are trying to sustain and are committed to sustaining is a more equitable distribution of our spend and of our dollars across racial categories and gender categories. And that's this breakdown that you see on page 31. Another change that is coming that we did not have available for this period is that demographic breakdown of the commitment data. The reason why we did not have it is that it is manual, so we did need to scope it and to make sure that we could commit to providing that, and it is feasible for us to do that, even though at this point it's one of those things that remains a manual process. Success stories, again, Jody mentioned this with our state contracts and our emergency declarations. And then we had an MCUB informal RFP success for $132,000 for a consultant to work with regional parks. And then, like I said, we're going to continue to track our supplier diversity spend with New Flyer and B&L Supply. And then these last three stories that I wanted to cover really kind of highlight some of the good stories that are going on. We had a project for K4 bollard installation. And even though the 12% goal that was set was exceeded by the apparent low bidder, and even though the other bidders had higher DB percentage participation, it was a success, not only just because the goal was exceeded, but this was originally a project that was part of a larger project that the business unit broke out of. And this is something that we've been really pushing business units because it's successful. And one of the other bidders was an MCUB bidder that would have probably not bid this project or had this opportunity. It provided a lot of other opportunities for small businesses to participate by breaking it off. So this is something that we definitely want to highlight and promote as a model for business units and successful ways to incorporate small business participation. And as I mentioned, the last two stories I want to tell are certification related. I wanted to mention that Abdi Kaheen, the owner of Afro Deli, was named by the SBA administration as the 2023 National Small Business Person of the Year. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because the council certified this firm, so we want to brag and take credit, even though, wanted to definitely highlight the success of Mr. Kaheen. And then also a story, a woman-owned business who had an opportunity to participate. It wasn't even a council project, it was a Metropolitan Airports Commission project, but her application was with the council and she requested expedited certification, and our team got it expedited, worked and coordinated with the other agencies to get the votes internally, externally with staff. And you always hear from folks when things go wrong. They rarely tell you when you do a good job. So it really, when she went out of her way to send this note praising our staff, and I'm just gonna read the roast that she said, "This opportunity to create a website for an aviation master plan could change the trajectory of my career. And I don't mention this to brag about our teams, although yes, I'm bragging about our team.
Everybody, we can just high fives all the way around.
But we report on a lot of numbers and charts, and sometimes it's easy to forget that the work we're doing, we're impacting people's lives at a very personal and real level. So I don't want to ever forget that and lose sight. And then also, you know, that certification is an area that, again, a lot of people don't think about, but it's important and it has impact. So with that, thank you, and we can take any questions.
Are there any questions?
Madam Chair?
Councilmember
Thanks,
Logan.
and I'm just gonna ask these, I don't expect answers right now, I know we wanna move on to the closed session, but just a couple of things that pop off my mind. First off, great work, I love getting these reports, I love the engagement with this committee, it's more robust than it was when we first got here, I think, and so your work is just excellent, so thanks for that. A couple of observations for me. One is that if we look at the first quarter P-card expenditures, you know, and we're just barely over half goal, right? And so just some kind of comment on progress to goal and things. Again, I can answer right now because I know we need to move on. And if we're looking at Q4 2022, the MCUB utilization summary, and I get it, it's presented differently. It's in construction and then in goods and services. Goods and services, pretty close to goal actually, but still not at goal. Construction, considerably short of goal. And so as we present these, I just think it would be helpful to hear some kind of comment on progress to goal, please. And then the other pieces, and again, not for a response right now, but this, I love this idea of measuring commitments, and I was noticing even before you reported on that in some of the contracts, there would be sort of 0 goal and 100% commitment. And I just thought that was an interesting dynamic. And so a question I have, or maybe what are we expecting to get out of this tracking? I love that we're doing it. My hunch would be that after you went through a robust process with some of these potential contractors and still the goal was 0, it's because it was reflecting what was out in the market. And then they are doing work if they're finding 100% commitment. And so I'm just wondering how the dynamic between what this commitment measurement and our ability to set higher, more accurate goals will be. Thanks.
Yeah. Did you want to quickly respond to that?
Yes,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Logan. Yes, to your last point, there's a couple reasons why that's important to track. One is there's a lot of times when we don't set a goal. However, we send a list to procurement to directly solicit MCUBs that can potentially bid as primes. So we want to know if that effort, one, if we're connecting with those businesses and they're getting opportunities that we can track as success stories. And then also, just in terms of our goal setting and the commitments, I think just in my observations empirically, I think when we changed in beginning of, it might have been end of 2019, right when I came to the council, to responsiveness, I think that's made a difference in terms of the commitments that we're seeing at the time of bid.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cedarburg and then Barber.
I have 3 things. One is I really like to hear how you pulled out parts of the contract. So big contracts, so your MCUB members could, you know, basically get a bigger piece of the pie by themselves. And I made that question just by reading your information. It's like, are those MCUB contractors just getting little bits of the pies? And if they can get a bigger contract, that helps their sustainability for their business as well. So appreciate that. The second one is, are you sharing with the people who do business with the Met Council your successes and your strategies for getting more inclusive and diverse vendors? And that might be helpful to share because you're maybe doing some things that other people aren't. And then just as a third, it doesn't have to be reported now, but I think it's always nice to hear maybe where some of the struggles still are. You know, it's always nice to hear the wins, but if there's a struggle here and there, I mean, that's fine because it's, you know, not perfect. It's always process improvement, but that would be something that maybe next quarter we can hear about too, is like, oh, we're still struggling here, but we're working on it because I know you are. So those are just 3 comments I have.
Very great comments, and I would say, I was thinking the same thing, a lot of great. And what else, in my words, can this body and the council do for you? I really want to encourage staff, all of us do, to tell us what you need and how can we help, and, you know, roll up our sleeves, whatever it is, so I appreciate that. Councilmember Barber?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a request, and probably dealing mostly with Jody. A lot of my transportation committee, which is mine, usually part of the process is much bigger than pencils sometimes. So, but I'm getting lots of questions about the purchasing process, RFPs, the bidding process, proposals, the board. Is there a way, like you've done some of these trainings, that we can do some of that? Because not everyone's coming from the public sector and could use some education.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Council Member, yes, I believe I am scheduled to do some individual council member training, and even after Environment Committee last night, I was thinking on my drive home about how it would have been proactive. It would have been a really great opportunity to partner with the project manager to do some training on what an emergency declaration is. So I hear what you're saying, and we're being proactive and looking at some opportunities to help onboard and educate council members.
And that would be great. I think that the questions that are getting asked are really good questions, but especially there's some nuances with some of these processes, especially when we pull in federal money or some of these different things that, you know, if we can get some sort of groundwork, that would be really helpful. So thank you.
Anything else? Councilmember Pacheco?
Madam Chair, as you mentioned, I sat in on the training after a long time trying to figure out all the acronyms. But it was very helpful. And I actually taken part, as well as other folks asking similar questions from the different departments. I could hear their questions. I thought it was very helpful too.
Yeah. I would say that if you do another round of them, I mean, I would love to sit in on that, just because I like to learn and I have a better understanding of what you're all going through on a day-to-day basis, and I can help to explain it better to people around me that we know when we talk about these things. So if I don't know, maybe the entire council, depending, would like to jump in and learn a little more about, I mean, because it's a big deal, right? We're putting money into this community, the region, we're making progress, and we want to be able to understand it a little deeper, and certainly in transportation and environmental services, but I think all of us could learn a little if we have the time to, you know, go through that. And the only last comment I would make is I love that you're encouraging the business units to think differently about how they're breaking out contracts, because, you know, I think I lost a little time during COVID, but maybe it's been a couple years since we already, you know, said, yes, let's go in that direction. So I know it's probably a bit of an art and a science, but the more pressure, in a positive pressure kind of a way, we can put without maybe a mandate, I don't know. But I think that's where you're starting to really, I think, you know, the vision that you guys had a few years ago is where we're starting to see some of our best results too. So I would encourage you to keep doing that. Anything else? The last thing I would say is, when I look at Councilmember Pacheco, is again, any of this that can get to the committee of the equity committee, you know, they eat this stuff up, I'm pretty sure. So it's, you know, and then, you know, we'll have more reports too, but it's the progress is encouraging, and I think that, you know, and I would only say maybe that's where you were going, Councilmember Cedarburg, is, you know, we're pushing a lot of information out in this region, but this is a big story that's kind of growing in a good way, and I don't know how, you know, we can continue to make sure people know that we're part of that work, but and the individual anecdotes and real life stories are tremendous. You see that in transit, right? We see a lot of really good stories about drivers and operators and mechanics and their anniversaries and all the things that they're doing to impact. And we're on the buses trying to hire them. And I would just say, man, you know, I think there needs to be a little bit of room too in our communication strategy to say the impact that we're trying to really make on everybody in the region. So good job. Okay. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again. Yes. And thanks for the delay in coming back, but we appreciate everybody who's working on this. Hats off to everyone. We appreciate it. All right, right now, I am going to turn it over to Councilmember Walker. She has a motion for us, as we are gonna close the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I move that this meeting be closed to the public pursuant to Minnesota statutes 13D.05 subdivision 3B and applicable case law so the committee can discuss with our legal counsel in a confidential setting attorney-client privilege matters.
Is there a second? Moved by Barbara and seconded by Lilligren. And I would just say, this is, that was our last information item that we had. This is gonna be discussion around attorney-client privilege issues related to 6 pending litigation matters listed on our committee agenda. A public body, by majority vote in a public meeting, may decide to hold a closed meeting under section 13D.05 subdivision 3B of the Minnesota Open Meeting Law to discuss attorney-client privilege matters. Discussing these litigation matters in a confidential setting will permit the council to engage in a candid discussion and resolve these matters in a way that benefits the council and the public. Discussions during the closed portion of this meeting to discuss attorney-client matters will be confined to the pending litigation only, which are the matters that are listed on our agenda. So without any of that further discussion, I will call for a vote on the motion to close the meeting. Do we do roll call on this or is it just vote? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed no. And that passes unanimously. So we just need to wait